Good evening, everyone. I'm Judith Liu. I'm going to be in charge of the slides and things, but we'll wait for everyone else to join in. Once the participants kind of slow down, we will get started. So hopefully in another minute or two. All right. Looks like we're slowing down on people signing in. So I just wanted to say again, I'm Judith Liu. I'm at Washington University in St. Louis. I'm the program director here. And I'm very happy to welcome all of you to the Otolaryngology Program Directors Organization Recruitment Update for this upcoming recruitment season. With me, I have several panelists who are also program directors of their respective programs. Dr. Brett Comer from the University of Kentucky, Dr. Tiffany Chow from the University of Pennsylvania, and Dr. Brad DeSilva from Ohio State University. So again, welcome. We will be going through a short presentation, and we would love to hear your questions. And so if you have questions, please input them so that we can either try to answer them during the presentation or definitely after. Again, we will do our very best to answer all of your questions here. So if everyone is ready, I will get started. If I can figure out how to get my pointer over back to slideshow. Okay, we'll get started here. So I just want to get started by introducing some online resources that everyone should be aware of. So there is a list of residency programs, program directors, and coordinators that is on our SUO OPDO website. In addition to the interview and recruitment advice and the interview calendar. So what the interview calendar is a listing of the dates that all the programs will be offering interviews this coming fall. And of course, there's really nothing there right yet, but they will be filling up as we get dates. And I just want to thank Beth Fauble and the other Beth and Colleen for helping us organize this webinar. Tonight's agenda, we'll be going through these different topics, and each of our panelists will be discussing these topics in turn. And then again, finally, we'll have a Q&A for all of your questions. All right, so we'll get started here with Dr. DeSilva.
Hey everyone, I'm Brad DeSilva. I'm the program director at Ohio State, and welcome tonight. I'm going to talk about application recommendations and interview format. So it's important to have your application done in time so that we can start reviewing it when it does get released to us, to the program directors and the programs on September 24th. So certainly applicants out there, be working on your applications now. You want to start asking for your letters of recommendation now throughout the month of July and August, so that those can be done in time and be in your application before we start to review those. You'll want 3 to 4 letters, which really should come from otolaryngology faculty. You can have one from outside of otolaryngology, but it should be from someone that knows you very well, has had extensive work with you, or maybe someone that you've done extended research experiences with throughout your medical school career. For away rotations, it certainly is not required to have a letter of recommendation from that rotation unless you do not have a home otolaryngology program. So that's a common misconception that when applicants rotate for away programs, that they need to have a letter of recommendation from that away program. Certainly, we're happy as program directors to write those for you, but it's certainly not a requirement unless you do not have a home program. Next slide. So for your application, you should have passed USMLE Step 1 or COMLEX equivalent and have your Step 2 score available when your applications are released. Programs want to see that information before they, start to make interview decisions, of course. One big change this year for our specialty is that we have opted out of geographic preferences for this season. Program directors agreed that They didn't find much benefit to having geographic preferences. Many students chose no preference. Most students want to train at the best program that fits well for their needs. And so we decided to opt out of this for ERAS this coming season. Next slide. So in terms of interview format, 2 years ago, when we were transitioning from virtual to in-person interviews again, there was about a 50-50 split between in-person and virtual formats. So we partnered with the AAMC to survey applicants after that interview season, and we had a nearly 40% response rate, and there's a strong preference for in-person interviews based on applicants' responses, 72%. But there was also comments that there's a desire for cost sharing and improving some of the financial needs and support options for the interview process, whether that be support for travel and hotel stays and such. And so you see many programs doing that and support from their local GME departments throughout the in-person interview seasons the last 2 years since then. Next slide. So with some of this data, how did this impact their ranking, the survey that was completed? So nearly 60% felt that their experience during in-person interviews made them more likely to rank those programs favorably, as opposed to only 3% for those that felt virtual interviews allowed them to rank programs more favorably. Now, there was a high kind of neutral response at 38%, but still with 60% nearly favoring in-person interviews in terms of getting a better experience for their interview, opportunities to meet people, see the city, see the places where they're going to work. This really impacted some of the decisions to go to in-person interviews after the 2-year survey. Let's go to the next slide. So partnering SUO, ADO, and OPDO have a joint statement on interview format. And this is really meant to help applicants, help residency programs, working with their local institutions and their GME departments. And so as you can state and see stated here, I should say, given the applicant's strong preference for in-person interviews and the influence of the in-person format on applicant ranking decisions, OPDO, the SUO, and ADO believe it's critical to continue to allow all otolaryngology training programs the opportunity to conduct in-person interviews for this upcoming application cycle. We had a similar statement last year, and it helped programs with discussing with their GME departments for supporting in-person interviews. And you can see this statement if it needs to be shared with your local institution on our webpage. Next slide. So what we expect for this year, almost all programs will interview in person. There will be some offer hybrid interviews and such that have virtual interviews for away rotators, virtual, those who rotated as sub-interns locally as well. So, but expect most interviews to occur in person throughout all programs. Next slide. This time I'll turn it over to Dr. Brett Comer. Thanks.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Brett Comer from the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. Dr. Liu and I are going to split some slides on what is known as preference signaling. For some of you, this may be a new concept. For others of you, you may have heard this frequently from some of your faculty mentors. Next slide. So just as a little bit of background, 5 years ago, otolaryngology started to use signaling, and we initially used a low signal approach for the first few years and then transitioned to a high signal approach last year. There are a couple of findings from doing this. One, an overall theme or goal was to better match interested applicants with programs so that they knew, each party knew who was really interested in each other, as opposed to the traditional kind of pan applying. Another goal was to better distribute interview offers, and then the benefits of signaling seem to carry across demographic groups. So next slide. So when it comes to signaling for this upcoming interview cycle, there's 3 main approaches to it. There is a low signaling approach, which you see on the left-hand side of the screen, and a number of specialties use the low signal approach still. Then there's kind of a hybrid approach where there's gold and silver signals. Gold signals mean I'm really, really interested in you as a program, whereas silver is kind of like a second tier, if you will. And then next slide, please. And then otolaryngology has been involved in the high signal approach. And the decision on 25 signals was made somewhat based off of some data from the orthopedics group as well as the OBGYN group. And based on the total number of otolaryngology residency programs, we decided on 25 program signals, both last year and for this coming year. Okay, next slide. So this is a busy slide. This is courtesy of David Chang at the University of Missouri. And just a couple of items to pull out of this slide. Number one, if you look at the total number of otolaryngology ERAS applications, there's been a wax and a wane to this over the years. Through the years, the majority have been US MD and DO applicants. And if you look at the green marks on this, you'll see that when signaling first started, not all the applicants were using signaling, although in the couple of recent years, this has really gained traction to the point now that the data would suggest that if you do not signal a program, your chances of getting an interview offer are quite low, which Dr. Liu will cover in just a couple minutes. Next slide. All right, so a frequently asked question, do I need to signal my home and away programs? Next slide. And the answer is an emphatic yes, please do this. Applicants are expected to signal both home and away programs unless they wish to prioritize other programs. Number one, this helps with long-term data from the signaling process because this helps us to counsel future applicants with the data, as Dr. Liu will go over subsequently. So I will turn it over to her.
Thanks, Dr. Comer. So why did we arrive at 25 signals, and how did we decide to do that? Well, what we found was in the 2023 application cycle, students applied to an average of 79 programs, and that was the peak of the number of programs they were applying to. And I think it's pretty evident that it's very costly and inefficient to both programs and students. Frankly, it's hard to review all those applications and really make sense of, who are these people that we're trying to review and wonder if they're going to be suitable for a program. So we saw that there was a potential to decrease the number of applications submitted by each student, and this would decrease the value of non-signal applications. So we would know that applicants were prioritizing certain programs and not so much other programs. And there was definitely the potential to increase the number of programs that receive benefit from signal, because then, we as program directors and faculty and programs would know who was really interested in our programs and really wanted to know more about our program specifically, rather than just trying to get into any program at all. So I think that it's really overall been very successful. In the 2025 cycle, the average number of applications has dropped to 47. So this is a busy figure, but what I'm explained to you is the top panel shows the number of applications in light blue per 122 programs. And so you can see it's kind of in descending order. So the most number of applications was a little bit over 300, and that went all the way down to a little bit over 100 for programs. The dark blue is the number of program signals, and so you can see then they varied from a little bit over 200 to as low as 12. And then the bottom panel shows you the percentage or the ratio of program signals per the number of applicants. So I will just say that anecdotally, having the number of signals and the number of total applications go down really helps us to look at each applicant more in depth and really do more of a holistic review, which I think is the goal of these program signals. So again, this is more data about the average number of applications per applicant as recorded by ERAS. So you can see in the era before the high signals, 2020 to 2023, the average number of applications was quite high. It went up as high as 79 and then decreased to 49 once we put into effect these two, the 25 signals per year. And then for programs, again, the advantage for programs is that it took us from an average high of 423 applications in 2022 to evaluate down to 223, which again allows us a lot more time to actually spend reading the applications and getting to know applicants on paper, and then trying to use a screening criteria or filter, and just because we're just so overwhelmed by how many applications we're receiving. So I'm just going to go through some data that even though we had 125 programs participate, we have data from 77 about the following data that has to do with the interview rates. Okay, so this is not all programs, but it's a decent majority. So why this is important for you as an applicant is that interview rates really vary significantly by whether you send a signal or not. So in the teal, that box and whisker plot, you can see that of those who sent a signal to a program, their median interview offer rate was 33%, and that went, the IQR was between 26 and 42%. However, if in the orange, if you did not send a signal, the median offer interview rate was 2%, and the IQR was 0 to 5%. So I think it's pretty clear that you do want to send a signal. So this is also reflected in whether you're a USMD graduate or international medical graduate. There wasn't enough applications from DO to be included in this analysis, but I think what you see is that that all applicants, regardless of whether you're a US graduate or an international graduate, benefit from signaling. Even though the overall rate of interview offers are low for international medical graduate, they're definitely higher if you signal, and you have nothing to lose by signaling. So our advice for preference signaling for this upcoming recruitment season is for applicants, please, for your own benefit, use all 25 signals. You definitely should signal both your home and away rotation programs, unless, of course, you will prefer different programs. And know that otolaryngology programs are automatically opted in for signal unless they have purposely opted out. So we don't anticipate there's going to be many programs that opt out, so please do signal. We are hoping, though, that programs will increase their transparency to applicants based on signals. So if you're a program, you come from a program where you know that really they're going to read only applications from those who have signaled, it would be really helpful to have this on your website saying that we do not anticipate interviewing any applicants who do not send us a signal. That may or may not be true. So knowing that would be, I think, helpful to the applicants. For the future, I think it would be helpful for programs to report the range of signals received in the past year so that, again, applicants as well as advisors have an idea of how to choose whether to signal or not to signal depending on the application, the applicant, as well as which program they're looking at. And then hopefully for the future, at some point, we might be able to come up with a list of programs who have received different categories of numbers of signals. So that will also help in the decision making about, whether you would be sending a signal to a program or not, and what your chances are perhaps in getting an interview offer, again, based on that. This is all hopes, but not necessarily something that you might see this coming year. Okay, Dr. Chow.
Thanks, Dr. Liu. Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Chow. I'm the PD at the University of Pennsylvania. And I'm going to switch gears slightly just to talk about the combined interview offer date, which was instituted a couple of years ago. Next slide. So the common interview offer date was instituted really just to benefit mainly applicants. Previous to this common interview offer date, interviews would be sent out by programs individually on a rolling basis, and applicants would have to respond to get their spot, mostly on a first come, first serve basis, which obviously would conflict with maybe any clinical rotations that applicants might be on, and it could be a little bit of a hectic, stressful situation. So our specialty instituted this a few years ago, and the idea is to increase the to increase the equity in being able to respond to interview offers sort of in a less time-stressed situation. So for the dates for this year, in terms of when programs will be releasing interview offers, that's going to happen on Friday, November 7th at noon Eastern Standard Time. And for programs, we strongly recommend that you do not send more offers than you have available interview slots. And then following that period, applicants will have a chance to review all of the interview offers that they received over the course of that weekend, so on Saturday and Sunday. And then interviews should not be scheduled prior to Monday, November the 10th at noon. So even for applicants who may be responding earlier, programs should not be taking those earlier responses into account and should be assessing all of the acceptances or turning down of offers starting at noon on the 10th. And so for applicants, again, please don't attempt to schedule any interviews prior to the 10th at noon, since programs will not be looking at any acceptances by then. And please also do not hold on to any conflicting interview offers or interview invites that you do not intend to complete, because obviously other applicants are hopeful to be able to use attend those slots. And so please only hold on to the interviews that you anticipate attending. Next slide. And then after this initial round of interview offers are accepted, then programs can then continue to offer additional interviews on a rolling basis if positions are still available. Programs may also choose at their own discretion to schedule second look open houses. That is typical for programs who are offering virtual interviews, which again, like we said before, we anticipate being the minority of programs, but still that might be an option for some programs this year. And then, like Dr. Liu mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, on the SUO OPDO webpage, there will be an interview calendar available for applicants to review. Programs will be putting in those dates, and our folks at SUO and OPDO will be putting those in so that you have a chance to review potential conflicts. Next slide. And then again, just to recap some of those online resources, all of this is available on the webpage. So a list of program directors and coordinators along with their contact info, as well as the timeline that we just talked about here for the interview offer dates and acceptance dates. That's all listed in that second page. And then, like I just mentioned, the calendar. And again, thank you so much to Beth, and Colleen for making all this possible. And now I think we're going to turn it over to Q&A for anybody who might have any questions.
So I'm going to go stop my share, and then we can certainly open this up for any questions. Let's see what we have here. Let's see. And again, I'm having difficulty with my mouse, and so I'm trying to find where my Q&A chat is. Okay.
Yeah, there's no questions listed yet, Judy.
Okay. So it looks like there was one answered question already. Yes. Perfect.
Yeah, you answered it in the upcoming slide already.
Okay. All right. Any questions from anybody? Looks like there's a couple more. All right, so first, is it common for programs to have cutoffs for bottom step 2 scores? Anyone takers?
I'm not sure what other programs have. We do not at Ohio State have any cutoffs. We don't use the step scores for determining interview offers at Ohio State, but I can't speak for other programs. So just need a passing score from our standpoint at Ohio State.
And I would say the same with us.
Same with us.
Okay. Is it recommended to get a letter from a department chair or a PD if possible?
I can input on that. I do believe it is helpful if you feel like they have a reasonable knowledge about you and have some experience with you. And the reason for that is for people who've been in the position of program directors and read a lot of applications over the years. we can kind of read some of the nuances both in the letter and then maybe what's not said as well. And so from that standpoint, it's helpful to know who is writing the letter. Now, that said, as one of the slides alluded to earlier, if you have somebody who's not a program director or a department chair who knows you rather well, let's say you've done a lot of research with them, spent time in the lab, then it's very reasonable to get a letter from that person.
So another question, what advice should we give to applicants when there are many from the same school?
I can take that one. So what we've advised our applicants in the last few years is to really actually communicate with each other. This is not a process that we oversee, but we really encourage all of our applicants to chat with each other, even starting from the time of applying to away rotations. In particular years when, say, applicants all want to be in a very similar geographic location, I think it's really helpful to help kind of have that communication and even a little bit of strategy in terms of where people are applying, especially if there's a high number and any given program might not be interviewing all 10 students applying from your program, even if all 10 of you are phenomenal applicants. So really encouraging people to even start that from the away process, even for signals too. So to be able to compare where each of you are signaling, and if there are places that, you really do want to go to, I oftentimes recommend just sticking with that. But if there are programs that, might fall a little bit lower on your signaling preference list, then, that you might be able to take that into account if your co-applicants might be, if a bunch of them are also signaling those same places.
So there's another question. Is it typical to signal both R25 and similar positions and categorical 5-year positions from the same program? Wondering how that is viewed. So we have both. If you signal one, we'll consider you to have signaled both. So I understand you don't want to necessarily use 2 signals at the same institution. Another one for students who do have a geographic preference, is there any other ways to make note of this in the application now that this function is gone? I would say it's easy to put it in either personal statement or, other information, special information. There's again, because I think there are fewer applications that we're reading, we can actually figure that out pretty quickly. For the coming year, you are expecting the minority of offers to be virtual? That's correct. What months do programs anticipate holding most of their interviews? It is expected that there will be a lot of overlap in dates between programs.
I can answer this. Yes, unfortunately, yes. We're limited in time, and so most of the interviews occur in December and January. Think about kind of mid to late November at the earliest, and then all the way up to about February 1st.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Question that in terms of the combined interview offer, the combined interview date, are we offered one date and have to accept the offer by the 10th? And if the date we are offered has multiple program offers for interviews, can we reach out to the program and see what alternative dates are available? Any of you guys want to take that?
Yeah, I think it depends on which system of interview offers each program is using. I think many use automated systems such as Thalamus. Others are, just do it manually through email, email invites. So it depends on the program. Some might offer options and give you the choice between a couple of different dates. Some might offer just a single date. But we encourage you to just keep that line of communication open with that program just to be able to hopefully best coordinate a date that works for you.
And there's kind of an accompanying question is, can you clarify what the days between November 7th and November 10th look like from both the applicant and the program side? For example, do we send requests, but then programs are not allowed to accept until the 10th when they see a request?
Right. So the programs are really not doing anything after noon on the 7th. All of those interview invites should have gone out around that time. And then really that weekend is for the applicants to be able to look at their interviews, their interview offers, look at their calendars and, try to plan flights, try to coordinate travel between dates, and really just coordinate for yourself and see, which ones you can accept and which ones you may have to turn down if there are conflicts. And so, yes, programs are really not supposed to be looking at any responses until the 10th at noon.
And there's another kind of goes about the interviews. If we receive interviews and they overlap with each other, Is there any system in place to help avoid overlap interview dates between programs? So I think most programs will have at least a couple of interview dates. And so, you're advised to try to figure out which dates work the best for you and your schedule, because, it's hard for us to coordinate, where you want to go and how you want to order your interviews. Okay. Let's see. Question about what should you do if you have concerns about a brand new attending strength of their letter recommendation, but you have a great relationship with them?
I mean, I think if you have a great relationship with someone, they know you well, you should trust that attending physician, that faculty member, to write a great letter for you. It doesn't matter if they're in their first year of practice or if they're known across the country. I think if they can be your advocate, and you should feel comfortable asking them for an interview, or for asking for an interview too. Ask them for a letter of recommendation, and you should do that and just have a frank conversation with them.
Kind of an accompanying question: are standardized letters of recommendation required or recommended?
They're not required. We've been using them for a number of years now, almost 10 years. And I think a lot of letter writers will write an additional paragraph or full letter expanding on the standardized letter of recommendation. So you see some variability. I think if you're a faculty member writing this question, you don't have to write a standardized letter of recommendation. I think it's nice to have, but not required.
Okay, so let's see. Do you recommend completing the ERAS impactful essay? So I think so. I certainly enjoy knowing a little bit more about experiences that you were feeling meaningful. It helps us to get to know a little bit more about you, especially since the experiences section is limited to 10 different sections. Okay. Let's see. If a student has to cancel an addition rotation with your site, does this blacklist the applicant from getting an interview? By an addition rotation, I'm assuming that means an away rotation. I would say no. At least in our program, we understand that schedules are schedules, and so sometimes you can come and sometimes you can't come, and by no means blacklists you at all. So, if you are going to do your third or fourth away rotation and it's November, don't do it. Just stay at home and make sure you have a good application in.
Agree. At Ohio State, I don't even know about it when that happens. So most of our faculty aren't aware. Only our medical student education director does, and so it doesn't impact interview decisions.
So kind of another along the lines of letters recommendation. If you had a mentor that is not ENT, but you've spent extended time with and would seek a letter of rec, would reviewers prefer 4 letters, 3 ENT, 1 non-ENT, or 3 letters, 2 ENT in total?
I can take this. I don't think there's a right answer necessarily for this, but one of the common themes is you want to get letter writers who will advocate for you. And while it is true within the field of otolaryngology, it's a fairly small field, so we know each other pretty well. If you have somebody outside that field that can write an outstanding letter for you, go for it. And I'm not sure that a 4th letter will necessarily make all that big of an advantage in terms of the overall application.
This is another one kind of regarding to away rotations. Is an AI in the month of September too close to ERAS to ask for a letter of recommendation? It's pretty close. Remember that the date that programs start to look at download applications is September 24th. So to finish an away rotation, get and find someone who's going to write a letter for you and have them have it done in time for programs to see. That's pretty tight. It's not impossible, but not exactly easy. Okay. Let's see. Let's go to any other questions that you guys want to let's see. Can you elaborate on some of the aspects of the application that you do look for interview consideration?
I mean, we look at everything in the application. I mean, we read it from start to finish. So put everything on there that you want to reveal, and it's a comprehensive review. We spend a lot of time on the application, so everything's important.
Yeah, I would say we have a rubric that we try to be as holistic as possible. So looking at everything from your accomplishments, your grades, your research experiences, to how you grew up and what led you to where you are. So I think it's all, if it defines who you are, then it's important. Let's see. How do you evaluate students who are on the lower side of step 2 scores? 230s, 240s automatically get screened out? I would say no. I don't know.
No, we said this earlier. You just need a passing score.
Yeah. Okay. What is the process like for couples matching? Do programs ever take this into account and give consideration to interviews if a partner has received an interview at that program?
I can speak to this. At UK, the program directors in general know each other pretty well. And so if there's a viable couples match partner, a lot of times it's an email or a text that say, hey, we've got a pretty good candidate on our side of things. You may have a candidate on your side. How's that looking? And we certainly try to accommodate for ones that are viable to try and make that happen. I don't know, I view a bigger picture of trying to keep couples together as very important for a lot of things, maybe not only within medicine, but outside of medicine as well. So.
Let's see. Let's go to, looks like there's as a faculty advisor and writer of dean's letters, what strength do you affix to the MSPE?
I mean, we review it, and it's part of the application. We review the comments, and certainly, medical schools that don't have certain like honors or, letters or high pass, we read those comments if they're on a, pass fail system. So we review it. It's important.
Yeah. So kind of maybe if we go to a pass fail school, how does that impact your review of the application?
I can take that. I really don't think it affects things. I think, like Dr. De Silva just said, we just, we do holistically review the entire application, including letters, comments from your MSPE. I think grades does end up being a relatively small minority of that overall, look at the application, particularly with more schools getting rid of things like AOA. So yeah, I do think it's just, it's a part, but it's a small part.
Kind of along the lines the other people have asked is, how much does a strong step 2 score help your application, if it does at all? I think it all really depends on, the rest of your application. If there's an isolated strong step 2 score, but it doesn't fit the rest of the application, then I don't think it helps very much. But if it supports, the strength of the application, then I think it's great. Another question about any general advice about couples matching, ENT, non-ENT applicant.
I mean, I would just say for couples matching, try to target cities that have multiple programs. I think can be helpful. That way you can be more likely to match in the same city, or even regions. If there's cities that are only, an hour or two apart, that's still a big distance. You don't want to be living apart. So I would really try to target your signals for places that have multiple programs in close proximity.
All right, so there's several questions about personal statements. How much weight goes into a personal statement when deciding who gets an interview? Some specialties weigh this heavily, some don't. So curious about this.
I think a personal statement needs to reflect who you are and perhaps at least part of your pathway into medicine or into otolaryngology in general. And one aspect I'll touch on, we may have on the call a few people who've not matched before. And so one thing I will counsel students who have not matched before with your subsequent personal statement, I would touch on kind of what's been revealed through not matching before, but don't dwell on it. So a couple sentences, 2 or 3 sentences talking about that, maybe what you learned from it, how you responded to it, and then move on. And I think that can be helpful for the non-matchers in particular out there.
Kind of a related question. Do you recommend writing a unique personal statement for each program? Is it okay if it's slightly longer than 1 page?
I would just say I don't recommend doing that. The only way that that might help is if it's not obvious on your application how much time you've spent somewhere previously. Like, for instance, you grew up the first 10 years of your life in a certain city and your grandmother still lives there and those kinds of things. You know, if that's something unique about you that we wouldn't know about your application otherwise, you can include that in your personal statement. But otherwise, writing unique paragraphs for every program is not recommended or really necessary.
Okay. Some other questions. What is the best way to find out what program values, research, outreach, community service, so especially specifics, etc.? What's the best way to find out what a program values?
One part of that, I don't know the answer to the whole question, but if you look at what their graduates are going into, you know, our majority of graduates going into private practice or employed practice, are they going into fellowships? Are they landing people eventually at big academic institutions? That can give you an idea of how academically focused they are versus perhaps clinically focused they are. Another thing is a little harder to get a hold of, but figuring out, you know, number of publications being put out per year from departments. Some departments on their websites are very forthcoming about that. Others, it's a little harder to find that.
I'd also say that, you know, some programs still do, you know, info sessions prior to ERAS opening, you know, later in the summer. And so I think that's a great way to just hear a little bit more about the program from the program leadership directly, maybe have a chance to talk to some of the residents. But, you know, I think just talking to the people there at the program can give you a great sense of all of those things.
There's a question about with there being multiple applicants from a single school, suggestions for applicants from institutions with no program chair or program director's letters. I'm not sure exactly I understand the question, but if you don't have a home program, I think that's where that's coming from.
I mean, that's where doing an away rotation, you know, or two really helps getting to know other programs, developing a relationship over the course of a month to have a letter of recommendation from that program's director and chair in those situations.
There's a question about what factors do you believe contribute to the lower match rates for DO applicants in ENT? What can DO applicants do to strengthen their applications, especially in light of potential parity challenges?
I can discuss this a little bit. We've had a few DOs that have gone through our program, and the ACGME a number of years ago started the Common Pathway, which was supposed to integrate the allopathic and osteopathic programs kind of into one pathway for residency. I personally believe it's not quite there yet because fields such as otolaryngology has been dominated by allopathic programs over the years. I do think this integration is slowly occurring, but it's just not quite there. And I think that's part of the disparity, if you will, with the match rates because, you know, a lot of the allopathic programs have been, you know, the leadership has been MD over the years, and that is changing. It certainly is changing.
And just to add to that a little bit, I do think it relates to what Dr. De Silva was just mentioning about, you know, applicants without a home program, because I do think a lot of DO programs are also similarly lacking, you know, their own otolaryngology department.
Mhm.
So, you know, I'd really encourage DO applicants to try to, you know, get out there, do more away rotations, get to know other programs, and be able to improve their applications in that way.
So there's someone who's asking, for those who are doing an away rotation in November, what do you recommend for potential interviews that may fall during the away? I would say my advice, don't do it. I think you're going to be busy. It's not going to really help you unless it's a program that you really, really, really want to get into.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions was asking, can you step away to schedule the interviews? Yeah, I mean, you just have a frank conversation with your team that week and say, hey, I really want to make sure I'm available to schedule these interviews at noon on that date. I'm sure the program will understand and allow that.
Okay, so there's a bunch of questions about research. How important is it having ENT-specific research?
One aspect of that I encourage students is, in terms of where your research lands, it should correlate pretty well with your expressed interest in otolaryngology. So in other words, if you started out medical school and thought you were going into cardiology or PM&R or something like that, I would expect that research might be focused more so in those areas. And then if you transition to thinking you're going to otolaryngology, we would think that the research also would transition to that. It would be somewhat not correlating if you said you were doing otolaryngology from your first year of med school and then had a bunch of orthopedics research or internal medicine research. So that's something we look at.
Let's see. There was a question about is there data on how many students do research year for those that match? I'm not aware of data per se. Unfortunately, there is an increased number of students who are doing more research years before going in. Yeah, I don't think that we have any like overall data. Okay, so like what constitutes a strong, excellent performance on our away rotation?
I think it's a matter of how you integrate with the team. So it's hard. You're trying to adapt to a new city, a new environment, new work environment. But someone that communicates effectively, is helpful for team rounds, that's prepared for the next day's events, whether it be surgery or clinic, getting access to the health record, early on, that can sometimes be challenging, even the first 2 or 3 days. And we understand that when you're coming from another institution, that there's a transition period where you're trying to adapt. But after that, if you can be well prepared and show your strengths and interact well with the resident team, I think all those things really allow you to have your foot in the door for a 28-day, interview process. Basically, we get a really extended look at you and feel comfortable and get to know you well. It's a great thing.
So there's a question about, do you take into account potential biases when reading MSPE comments, i.e. if there's a negative statement on one rotation amongst good evaluation across the remaining rotations? I think that, reading the MSPE, it depends on the strength of the other comments, right? And so, if it seems like this is a one-off and it's just isolated, it's unlikely to, weigh. But the fact that it was even included, the MSPE, it's certainly something that would make us have thoughts about, okay, well, why was this even mentioned in a written statement? So, I would say you have to work with your letter writer, your dean, whoever's writing the MSPE, to make sure that this is as good as it can be. And I believe you do have a right to review that. Okay. On the topic of previously unmatched applicants, do you recommend applying to programs that have interviewed them in the past or against it?
I wouldn't say against it. I'd say, if you've interviewed there once before, I would say your chance of interviewing again is probably lower, just to be quite frank with you. I would say if you're trying to limit the number of applications you put out there, then probably best to focus on other programs, since that program already kind of knew you before and didn't didn't place you high enough on their rank list to match. So I would probably focus on different programs, talk to your advisors, look at your signal list. Where did you signal the year before? Maybe making some changes there. There's not a lot of benefit in applying to a program that you're not signaling. We talked about that data already. So focusing on, where you signaled the year before, where you interviewed, and then talk to your advisors about making those changes for the upcoming year.
Just a last couple of questions, few questions. What is considered a strong step 2 score? Exactly.
I don't know. We don't look at it.
All right. What advice do you have for putting together a signal list? So I think some of the things to look at, again, even though we don't have geographic preferences listed, if there are areas that you would rather go to than not go to, that certainly starts to narrow your list. There are only 125 or so programs in the country. So it's not like, we have 300 or 500 programs out there. Talk to your advisors. How strong an applicant are you? Are you going to be a strong candidate for for a very competitive program? Is research in your line of thinking, or is private practice in your line of thinking? Consider those factors as you put together your list of programs. Other advice?
Yeah, I would say, talk to maybe those that matched the year before and just see what where they signaled, where they had some success, where they had interviews from. They're maybe more likely to, get interviews of similar places. Did they get any interviews at a place where they didn't signal? That would be interesting information to know. We don't have that data to provide you. So talking to the previous year's class, if you have friends that, just graduated, that would be a good thing to talk to them about as well.
And kind of the one question I think that is hard for all of us to answer is what makes a compelling personal statement? That one's hard.
Yeah, I think for me, it's something that's genuine. That's something that's that it kind of describes you and why what led you to ENT. And I don't think you necessarily have to include a life-changing experience, necessarily. If that is part of your journey, that's great. I do love reading about those. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, we want to it's a way for us to just get to know you more as an applicant. And so, yeah.
I agree. It shouldn't rehash your application or your accomplishments. You have the application for that. Try to tell a story about who you are otherwise, who shaped you or what shaped you in your life. Imagine the person reading it wants to meet you after reading this. So that's the best advice I can give. Make it personal, make it about you, so that I want to meet you. I want to shake your hand and meet you in person after reading it. So.
Looks like we have one more question. Should we explain one-off dips in a grade or on a clerkship if all others are honors?
I would say no.
Yeah, I would focus less on your grades and more on letters of recommendation. So, all right. So one more question. To clarify, can we still submit geographic preferences on ERAS, but you won't see it on your end? So we will not be seeing geographic preferences, regardless of whether you submit it or not. So if you are applying to another program, another specialty, and you submit on geographic preferences, that's certainly reasonable for those other specialties, but it won't make a difference for otolaryngology. Okay. Well, I don't see any more questions for right now, so hopefully that means that you have gotten the answers that you would like. We will be here for just a couple more minutes. For everyone who hasn't been able to see the whole webinar, this will be has been recorded and will be posted on a website so that you can review parts that are applicable for you. Okay. Well, I do want to thank our panelists, Dr. Chow, Dr. De Silva, Dr. Comer, and Beth Fauble for helping us put this all together tonight. Thank you all for your attention and your great questions. We hope that this has been helpful, and we look forward to meeting you on the interview trail.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Good night.